Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Speaking of Spirits.
Tonight I'm talking about cattle mutilations. Most of us have heard about cattle mutilations, but really they're a lot more complex than I initially thought. So I started doing some research a few weeks ago, and I thought, what a fascinating subject, because this has happened so much more than, just a sporadic article in the newspaper leads us to believe. And it's happened all across the globe. Just about every continent has had cattle mutilations in the records. So what I found was quite possibly the first case of the mutilations on record is in London, 1606. It was noted in the official court records of James I. The records note that slaughters of sheep occurred, not cattle, but sheep. But again, in England, it's primarily sheep that are grown, not cattle. So there was nothing taken from the sheep but their tallow and some inward parts. So maybe some intestines. I don't know exactly what that means. There were other cases in the late 1800s and 1900s, but again, records are really spotty. I couldn't find much on those. Apparently, they were recorded by Charles Fort, a gentleman who lived in Texas. A horse was discovered dead with surgically precise cuts carried out in order to remove its entire nervous system. Bizarre. I can't even imagine this. And this is in the 18 and 1900s, right? So this is that time frame. Is just, it's mind-blowing to me that this happened. Its face had also been completely stripped to the bone. This mutilation occurred at the exact territory as a wave of sheep mutilations that occur over a century later in 2013. So, kind of mind-blowing to me. Think about what it would take to do something like that. And did they have the technology back then to completely strip a central nervous system out of a horse? The next case, fast forward to 1967-ish. It's a horse that's killed and the skin's partially removed. And since then, a rash of mutilations happen all across the United States. There's nearly 10,000 horses and cattle mutilated on over 1.28 million acres from Tennessee to Oregon, and from Minnesota to New Mexico. And they continue to present day, with several mutilations happening in 2023 in Oregon. And according to an FBI report carried out in the late 1970s, there were as many as 8,000 mutilations that occurred in the state of Colorado alone. And Colorado seems to be kind of like a hotspot for these cattle mutilations. In many cases, trace elements found on the carcass and the soil are the same as those elements found after a UFO sighting. In some cases, the carcasses are found on top of telephone poles. Literally on top of a telephone pole, like they've been picked up by a helicopter and dropped. Native Americans refuse to talk about mutilations, only saying that the Star people are responsible. And there's been mutilations on reservations as well. This is not just, this is like a phenomenon that's happening all over the United States. Since the early 1970s, incidents of mutilated cattle, sheep, horses, rabbits, deer, bison, and elk have been recorded, with the bloodless corpses often lacking jaw flesh, eyes, ears, tongue, lymph nodes, and genitalia. Fall of 1973, 40 cattle mutilations in a dozen counties in north central Kansas occurred. Most happened along US 91 through Kansas and Nebraska. The mutilations included surgical precision removal of eyes, ears, genitalia, udders, and some neck flesh. The director of the Kansas State University said that the cattle died of blackleg disease, which can happen after eating poisonous larkspur. But this really infuriated the ranchers because they know what blackleg looks like. They've all lost cattle that have eaten larkspur. I mean, most cattle won't eat a poisonous plant. Juvenile cattle will, because they haven't, developed enough senses to stay away from something like that. And blackleg is a condition that after death, I mean, everybody knows who raises cattle what blacklegs look like. So there were no tracks, no blood, no predation on these animals, which is fascinating. Some of the animals were left just outside the farmhouse within feet of the door, and some animals were found really remotely. Many farmers also reported seeing helicopters flying over the cattle on the days that the mutilations occurred. Like someone is tracking this? Fascinating to me. So some of the helicopters were reported as being black, some of them were white, but many of these ranchers saw helicopters. Then they discovered the corpses, and so they're trying to put all this together. April 1974, more mutilations were found, this time in Nebraska. Again, no blood, organs surgically removed, and again, helicopters were sighted. Only this time a farmer said he was shot at by someone in the helicopter. Farmers started organizing and stopping cars to look for evidence. They're pissed, right? They've formed like a vigilante group because law enforcement isn't helping. I mean, what can they do? They don't know what's happening. The farmers had asked the FBI to intervene, and the FBI said, it's not in our purview. So they formed their own, quasi sheriff's department group, and they started going out and looking for evidence. They would actually stop cars on the highways and look for evidence of, did you do something to my cattle? And they also started shooting at helicopters. When they'd see helicopters fly over, the farmers were shooting back. And this led to actually the Air National Guard increasing their flight levels by 1,000 feet to avoid being shot at. And also at this time, not only were helicopters being seen, UFOs are now being seen around these cattle mutilations. Again, farmers requested an investigation, the FBI declined. This also led to suspicion around the federal government that many cattle owners believe the feds are somehow now involved, right? They're not going to help, so what are they hiding? And I can certainly understand their frame of mind. Losing cattle is very, very expensive on a ranch who has really thin margins for making it. So in 1974, the mutilation spread into South Dakota and Minnesota. Then in 1974, a series of UFO sightings occurred over where a cow was found mutilated in Kimball, Minnesota. On the farmer's frozen pond, there was this weird circular indentation, and some thought it was from a UFO, but this was later debunked when the farmer said he had chopped holes in the ice for water for livestock. And then it was also at this time that this federal prisoner named Bankston came forward to say that he had information on the mutilations. Investigators talked with him, and he provided some details that he was part of this satanic motorcycle club that was doing the mutilations as part of a sacrifice. Investigators spent a lot of time chasing down these leads, only to find that Bankston's motive was to move to a federal prison in Mississippi, and he was also scheming a prison break. So the Bankston was bunkus. It was, even though still today you're going to hear talk about, a satanic motorcycle group or some satanic worshipers. Come on, 10,000 cattle? No, I don't see that. All over the United States? All over the world? No. So back to square one. Nobody had any answers, and the cattle are still dying. In 1975, the mutilations moved primarily into Texas and New Mexico. Local investigators had hundreds of cases and zero leads. The mutilations followed the same pattern. Most cows and bulls were found on their right side, which I find kind of interesting. Genitalia, eyes, sometimes ears, and their tongues would be surgically removed. There's zero blood around the body, not even like coagulated blood under the body. No tracks around the body other than bird tracks, and usually no predation found on the corpse. And think about that. You've got scavenger animals all over, right? So you've got vultures and coyotes and in some cases wolves, you have bear, you have cougar, you have animals that are going to take anything that they can find to survive. But they're not feeding on these animals. In March 1975, a cow was mutilated in Big Spring, Texas. Its udder was so carefully removed that the stomach lining had not been punctured. Like scalpel removed, right? Also in March 1975, 2 mules were mutilated in Texas. They were found in a circle of stubbled wheat. The stubble was about 30 feet in diameter, and when they tested the wheat, it was mildly radioactive. So, what the hell is going on here? At Kilgore College in Texas, a student wrote a paper on the subject. The teachers were really critical of the paper. They pulled the paper. This big brouhaha happened. He allegedly had sources and contacts on these mutilations. And this led to an investigation by the Texas and Southwest Cattle Ranchers Association. And the investigation led to a motorcycle gang called the Sons of Satan. They said they were using the cattle to perform sacrifices, but just like in Minnesota, the story spun by Bankston, the story had zero evidence and was not credible. Okay, still the killings continued. I'm going to give you a little bit of a list here. Again, there's 10,000, but I'm going to give you this list, and even though, just to drive the point home about how fast this was happening. October 1975, Springer, New Mexico, dead cow, missing eye and udder. October 1975, Clayton, New Mexico. Bull missing scrotum, penis, and rectum. October 1975, Raton, New Mexico. Bull missing scrotum, testes, and penis. October 1975, Springer, New Mexico. Bull missing rectum, penis, and testes. October 1975, Narra Vista, New Mexico. A cow missing rectum and vagina. October 1975, Tucumcari, New Mexico. Bull missing sex organs and tongue. 1975, November, Narra Vista, New Mexico. Cow missing sex organs, tongue, and left ear. 1975, Tucumcari. This is November. Calf missing sex organs, bag, and flesh. November 1975, New Mexico. Cow missing tongue and eye. November 1975, New Mexico. Calf missing rectum. November 1975, New Mexico. Heifer calf missing udder and sex organs. I mean, this is bananas. Absolutely bananas. In 1975, Montana also starts seeing a rash of mutilations. But it wasn't just mutilations going on in Montana. There was also documented UFOs and documented aliens. So let's go to September 1975 to May of 1976. There's 5 counties in north central Montana, and they have all of these reports of cattle mutilations, including enormous UFOs, like they said hotel-sized UFOs, giant hairy humanoids, and a fleet of black helicopters going on at the same time. So Cascade County Sheriff Deputy Keith Wolverton started investigating the case, and he observed that the cattle were again mutilated with very sharp instruments. The next month, a cow near Belt was discovered with its left jaw skinned. And when you see these pictures, I mean, they're totally skinned. And they're surgically like a precise cut. It's missing its tongue and its right eye. You can tell if you've been around any livestock that's passed away, right? Predation, when like a bird goes for an eye, it's completely different. The eyes had been surgically removed. And it not through its eye socket, but in a hole above the eye. Perplexingly, the cuts were accompanied by burns like they were cut with a laser. Bananas. So a calf was found covered in a filmy white substance that stretched like a cobweb all over the corpse of the calf onto the ground. So they took samples of it, and it was petroleum distillate, which is crazy. From summer on, reports of mutilations came in. So one night in August, there was 3 cattle mutilations on 2 different ranches in Montana. And so they can't, like, the sex organs were removed, and like similar to like if a veterinarian did a C-section on the cow. That's how precise these organs had been removed. Others exhibited puncture wounds, which were emptied, and they were emptied of blood. Or they had limbs removed via like cuts that sheared through the bone, not a joint, and it left no bone dust. One animal was found on top of a butte that was inaccessible to, I guess, vehicles. And it was also, a leg was completely missing, like cut off surgically. And then in 1 week in 1975 in Montana, the Cascade Sheriff's Department received reports of a cattle mutilation, 16 UFO sightings, and 21 helicopters that are unmarked. Then, 23rd of December, a woman is driving to work at the Great Falls Airport, and she witnessed an egg-shaped craft. She said it was as large as a 2-story building. And then a month later, a rancher saw a hotel-sized UFO accompanied by 3 lights in a field. And he said it was like 300 to 400 feet long, 60 feet in height. It had 2 rows of window, 5 to 6 feet high. I mean, this is bizarre stuff, okay? The day after Christmas, 2 Great Falls girls heard their horses rearing up and pawing at the ground. I have horses. If you have horses, it's a distinct sound of right? They're in distress. They're nervous. Something's going on. So they run outside and they see a 7.5 foot tall and twice as wide man, like this huge dark shadowy thing that looked human but it's not human. And being Montanas, the Montana kids, they shot at it with their .22 rifle, but it didn't affect it at all. So they go over their house, they go back to the house because they're freaked out. And then they looked back to see, they thought they saw 2 to 3 others of these alien beings out there. And their father, they told their father what they saw. And he said he heard a noise like a human dying an agonizing death just after midnight that morning. So I don't know what the heck's going on here, right? 2 days after, let's see. Oh, okay. So, sorry. Just as mysteriously as it started, it stopped in Montana. And that's what happens with these cases. You'll get a rash of them, and then it stops. Then it moves somewhere else. So now we move to January 1976. Pintada, New Mexico. A cow is missing its rectum and udder. But there's also 2 holes in her jugular vein on the right side and a hole between her front legs and 2 holes in the back of her hip bones. All of her sex organs are removed. Again, Pintada, New Mexico, same month, January 76, cow missing an udder. April 1976, Chile, New Mexico, a blue roan mare is found dead, missing her udder and her rectum. Again, it's not predation. It's not like something scavenged these. These are cut off surgically. May 1976, Corona, New Mexico, a bull missing testicles. June 1976, New Mexico, a steer missing the right ear, right eye, tongue, penis, and rectum. July 1976, New Mexico, a buffalo calf missing tongue, sex organs, rectum, and large intestine. A helicopter was seen over the calf by a farmer. 1976 July, Cuesta, New Mexico. It just goes on and on and on. So in December 1978, an article was written by a gentleman named Fritz Johnson, and he stated that a semi-secret test was conducted the summer of 1978. And he claimed that there was new evidence in the mutilations occurring in New Mexico. Less than 4 days before the test that occurred in that summer, Teos residents, homeowners, were started seeing UFOs. And then they do this test. And the materials after the test and the UFO incident were taken. There were samples taken and it was sent to Albuquerque National Lab. But I'm not finding a whole lot of information on the test itself, which is interesting. There was another test at one point, and I'll talk about it. Again, Albuquerque National Lab was brought in to look at these samples. So some 35 more mutilations happened in New Mexico that year, and then it starts in Arkansas and Mississippi. So let's go back to this New Mexico test. What they did was they round up 120 cattle and they put them in a pen overnight under UV lights. The next morning they come to the pen. There's 120 cattle in there, but 5 of the cattle are found with an odd substance on their right legs, ear, and neck the next morning. Because, right, they're going to run them through a chute and take a look at these cows. So now they've got 5 singled out that are like, what the heck? Samples of these substances and pieces of the hides were removed, as well as some hide from unaffected cattle to use kind of as a control samples. The affected animal hides had significant deposits of potassium and magnesium, some 70 times normal. Where did that come from? The control cattle didn't have them, so what the heck? Oh, there's no explanation. June 1977, more mutilated cows are found in Dulce, New Mexico. Police believed at the time that the cattle are being rounded up, killed, mutilated, and brought back to their ranches the same night. But there are no tracks and no proof. Does that make any sense to you? It doesn't to me. One of the mutilated cows was found 500 yards from the spot where one had been found exactly a year ago before. So, there are no tire tracks, no blood. In some cases, there's weird unidentified tracks, like they're animal tracks, but not really. They can't figure out what's going on. One cow looked like, it had broken legs, and it looked like it had been in some kind of restraint and dropped. Bizarre. July 1978, 4 more cows discovered in Dulce, New Mexico on the Apache Reservation. They were found in a 1-mile radius. The skin looked like it had been burned in 18-inch patches. The rectums were taken out, the tongues were cut out, genitalia removed, and UFOs again were reported by residents. Through the 1970s, cuff records by farmers indicated some 10,000 animals had been mutilated. By 1975, the Colorado Associated Press voted mutilations as the #1 story in the state. The odd helicopter sightings continued as well, and the Bureau of Land Management stopped flying aerial surveys because they were afraid that the farmers were going to shoot at them. The military also kept their flight levels increased at that another 1,000 feet level, right? 1993, mutilations now moved to Alabama. In October 1992, farmer John Strawn, who lived in Marshall County, which is the town of Albertville in Marshall County, reported the area's first mutilation case. There's this article by Dylan Smith. He was a rancher's neighbor, and he found one of Strawn's cattle on its side with its entire udder missing, and again, no blood at the scene. He calls local law enforcement. They come out and looked. The cow had a charred incision where the udder had been removed. Over the case of the next few months, other farmers around Albertville had reported other cases, and the Fife Police Department noted that the organs had been removed from the cattle, but organs removal had varied from case to case. And they said, look, the organs have no commercial value. I mean, it's the meat that has the value. But sex organs of both male and female cattle had been extracted in oval, bloodless precision. A black Angus steer owned by Tommy Cole, who was then chief of detective in Albertville, had also fell victim to the mutilation. In the weeks that followed, there were other mutilations in Fife, in Oak Grove, and in Dawson. And in February 93, 9 additional cases happened in ranches in DeKalb and Marshall counties. So at that time, more than 30 mutilation cases had been reported in Alabama's Appalachian region. And the police departments are just stumped. They're trying to coordinate their investigations, but I mean, it's just so random. And there's no evidence at the scenes. So authorities looked at one cow whose genitals and rectum had been carved out, and they said it was about the size of a coffee can that was missing. The cow's jaw and tongue were also removed. Once again, no blood at the scene. So they also described a flaky white material on the animal's rib cage. The rib cage was actually 5 feet away from the animal, precisely, like cut and moved. So they removed the flaky particles, and this is bizarre. So one police officer's kind of moving the flakes around. They put it into like an evidence bag, and they're moving the flakes around with a ballpoint pen, like the brass tip of a ballpoint pen. And within 1 second of contact with the brass, the material melted into an almost clear liquid. So to risk that happening again, they put some samples in a jar, and they took it in for testing. And after 2 tests, the scientists determined that the substance was composed of aluminum, titanium, oxygen, and silicon in significant amounts. And one of the experts who looked at these samples said the amount of titanium was larger than he would have expected to see in any substance at all. And the biologist said there was no explanation of how these combinations of elements could have occurred in nature. Weird. So then we have another significant case that's a cow belonging to a rancher in Crossville. And he determined that he goes out to see his herd in the morning, and a 3-week-old calf was missing from the herd. So when the calf was found, it was missing a portion of its right hindquarter and all of its internal organs. The chest area was absolutely an empty cavity, and no blood was found. You tell me how that can happen. So according to local authorities, the surgical incision on this calf appeared to have been conducted with extreme heat. So Dr. John Altschuler, he was a University of Colorado field expert. He looked at the extraction and said the temperature needed to make this incision would have been hundreds of degrees, or possibly higher. And it's just not, this doesn't happen in nature, okay? So what's kind of interesting about this Fife area is that Fife is known as the UFO capital of Alabama. And so all the way back to 1989, there's been a rash of UFO sightings in this area. So they even have like a local UFO days and a festival. I thought that's a pretty interesting coincidence. March 2021, 3 cattle are mutilated in Oregon with the same MO. Oklahoma had also convened a special task force, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation ran undercover operations, but they never failed to find they failed to find a human cause. They couldn't find any cause. They have zero idea what's going on. The New Mexico Livestock Board asked Los Alamos Scientific Lab for help, but other than these weird analytical samples that people were getting every once in a while, there's zero answers. So a coalition of livestock owners hired retired FBI agent Kenneth Rommel to investigate. He did find that some of the cattle he looked at seemed to die of natural causes and had natural predation, but others did not. He had no answers. And cattle continued to die. But now they're dying in other countries as well. So in early 2010, we'll go back to sheep, right? Shrewsbury, England, find mutilated corpses of their sheep. And these corpses contain many of the same injuries as the cattle and bull mutilations that we're seeing in the United States. For example, some of them were found with their faces completely stripped of flesh, surgically removed. And some of the sheep were discovered with a hole in their heads, seemingly drilled, and their brains were completely removed through the hole. I have no idea what could do that. Like what could do that? It's just like suck their brains right out. Farmers claim to have witnessed laser-type beams aimed at the sheep, coming from some kind of craft above them. Other witnesses to these events also state that they saw orange spheres in the sky over the fields where the sheep were living when they were mutilated. The events kind of culminated in March 2010 when a team of on-site investigators are in these fields in England looking at the sheep and trying to get some evidence when they saw the lights. They saw the UFOs. So they said it appeared to be attacks. They were witnessing attacks on the sheep. And there was like Star Wars type technology involved. They found that many of the farms in the area that night, the next morning, they go out and find sheep are missing. Like they're gone. So they witnessed something going on, but they don't know what happened exactly. So then we go to Vancouver, Washington. And on 5 different mornings between June and October 1990, a Vancouver farmer named Richard Fazio found 5 of his cattle dead. Their tongues, eyes, and organs were scattered across 3 pastures along the Columbia River. So something dissected them and scattered their organs. If a predator is going to do this, they're going to eat it. They're going to eat the organs. Then we go back to across the pond to Wales. In the decade of 2000, we have cattle mutilations in Wales that went on for over a decade. So for 12 years, the Animal Pathology Unit would announce their strongest conclusion was that it was extraterrestrial intelligence. They have nothing that would point to a human. And they said not only is it the laser-like precision of cuts, but it's the draining of the blood that on the bodies of the sheep and the cattle. They said what can do that? There's nothing that we know of that can do that. And so they also said, look, the farmers are also corroborating that there's all of these lights going on above the fields, and the investigators found it as well. So that's just, Wales became an apparent hotspot for animal mutilations between 2001 and 2013, and it also is a hotspot for UFO sightings. If you look through the documents of UFO sightings, Wales is right there. Okay, so let's go back to the U.S. The mutilations and UFO sightings continue. In spring of 2013, you have Port Lavaca, Texas. And at first, the owner of the sheep that are down there, and if you go down to that area, they do raise a lot of sheep in this area. So the farmer's losing some sheep, and he thought, okay, maybe somebody's stealing them for food. But then they started seeing the mutilated sheep and the surgical precision. They're like, yep, this is not food. I don't know what's going on. And then in the same area, a rancher went out to feed his herd of 80, he had red and black Angus cows and calves. He said the herd's racing about, they're panicked, and a cow that had given birth a week before is bellowing, which is not a good sign. That means baby's missing. Something's gone. The baby's gone. Something's going on. So he goes out by the trough, and he's now his farm his ranch is locked and gated. Okay, so he goes out to the trough and he finds the calf. Its front legs and torsos were gone, surgically removed. Its back legs were hanging by hide to a shattered pelvis and a meatless backbone. I have no idea what could do that. Then he saw the ears. They had been sliced off the head in a circular surgical cuts. He noticed that there were no tracks and blood anywhere. 1900s, let's go back to the 1900s. We have, again, a horse that's mutilated. And this was quite interesting that the horse was found with no traces of blood and nothing but the bone above the neck. So just the skeleton above the neck. And this is the second horse that I've read about that looked like it had its central nervous system had been removed with a laser. I have no idea what that would even look like. And then they said a bag with unknown metal tools was found some 50 feet away from the horse, and they said it looked like some kind of laser gun. Weird. But United States and England and Wales, they weren't the only countries, right? Argentina saw cattle mutilations in 2014. Same thing. Faces surgically removed, holes in the head. 2016, Colorado Springs, go back to horses are being mutilated. This one was really interesting because the rancher had called the sheriff who came out. The surviving horses, were in a pen, and they were clustered together so tightly and nervous that the sheriff made note of it. And also he could hear the ranch dog in the house howling like in fear. So they go out and they take a look at the two horses that were mutilated. There's no tracks, no blood. And the rancher said that the surviving horses and the ranch dog were so traumatized by whatever happened that night, it took months for them to calm down. And the dog refused to leave the house. So I don't know what could do that. October 2019, Silves Valley, Oregon, 5 bulls are mutilated. They were missing their genitals and tongue. And then Madison County, Texas, April 2023, it continues. No footprints, no blood, no tracks. They're missing the skin around their mouth, anus, and genitalia. At this point, a former New Mexico police officer said that he believes the military is responsible for all the mutilations. His name's Gabe Valdez, and he was a New Mexico State police officer. And he said, look, I've been investigating these cases, and I believe that a federal agency is doing experiments at an underground facility. And he says that he's found some military gear like gas masks and glow sticks around some of the carcasses of the mutilated cattle. But I couldn't find any other information on that. So, as the New Mexico cases were researched on one ranch, the mutilations became even more bizarre. In some cases, the hearts and livers of cattle were found as white mush with the consistency of peanut butter. Further testing revealed that extremely high levels of zinc, phosphorus, potassium, as well as no copper whatsoever were in the samples. Those scientists who took these samples and analyzed them have absolutely no explanation. They're like, we have no idea what could happen. They also noticed general tissue damage and discoloration. And interestingly, what I found in researching a lot of these cases is this theory of the 37th parallel. So apparently, along the 37th parallel, all around the world, this seems to be a hotspot for UFOs. And it's called a UFO superhighway. And it also happens to be an area where a lot of these mutilations were clustered. It's also the latitude of choice for government bases and American Indian holy sites. I need to look more into the 37th parallel, but that sounds bizarre to me. So what do you think? Is this a worldwide satanic cult performing mutilations? And who owns the helicopters and where are they sighted? There's no markings on these helicopters. They don't have any kind of decals on them whatsoever. And are the mutilations like some sort of test by aliens? And why cattle? Is it like the sheer abundance of cattle that we have? and the loneliness of these ranches where they can go out and do things and not be observed. I mean, obviously some of them are being observed, but I mean, some of these ranches are just vast, and I don't know. It's a fascinating subject, and I'd love to hear your theory. Thanks for listening.